This is the Himalayas, a beautiful mountain range spread across 5 countries. 70 million years ago, the Indian plate got separated from the Indian Australian plate and collided with the Eurasian plate, creating the Himalayas. As beautiful as it is, this very movement of the Indian plate has a major consequence: earthquake. Due to this reason, Nepal is one of the most seismically active regions in the world. If we place the clock on this land, there has been mega disaster in every 80 years and it will continue to happen. On April 25, 2015, Nepal was hit by the singular largest earthquake in the recorded history of the country, killing nearly 9,000 people and damaging around 1 million houses. The time was devastating. The damage was huge. But the damage could have been minimal if only people had built their houses following the 1994's National Building Codes and 1997's Building Act. After 1988's Udaipur earthquake, Nepal government introduced these policies addressing unregulated construction around the countries. But the policies and codes were limited to papers only. Weak mud houses were constructed in rural areas with no regulations, and in cities, regulations were highly irregular. Those unsafe houses made the Gorkha earthquake more devastating. There were damage assessment guidelines and policies in place to conduct a post-disaster survey before 2015. Following this policy, National Planning Commission conducted rapid initial damage assessment soon after the earthquake and published the Post-Disaster Needs Assessment (PDNA) report in June 2015. This report was fundamental in documenting the damage and losses, highlighting the affected sectors, ascertaining the budget requirement, government capacity, and the required support to pave the way for recovery and reconstruction planning. Nepal government organized an international conference to urge international donors to support reconstruction and recovery. More than 4.4 billion USD, almost two-thirds of recovery needs, were committed by international donors. All the pledging and assessment was done, but to carry out the massive reconstruction campaign, new policies and an independent authority was needed. On 21 December 2015, Nepal government issued a Reconstruction Act, after which National Reconstruction Authority (NRA) was formed, with the Prime Minister as the chair of the steering committee, which later led the process of reconstruction and coordinated among all stakeholders. The relevant government agencies and ministries undertook reconstruction activities following the policies and plans set forth by the NRA. The inclusion of government institutions in reconstruction brought in vast experience in developing the state's capacity in disaster response and recovery for the future. The Post-Disaster Recovery Framework (PDRF), published after the formation of NRA, which guided reconstruction process through a Build Back Better approach, asserting the need of enhancing local and state capacity for sustainable disaster resilience. It paved the way for a uniform delivery of assistance in both socio-technical and financial aspects to the earthquake-affected communities. With reported 50% of the damages in the private housing sector, reconstruction of private housing was prioritized. Government moved forward in the earthquake-affected districts, following guidelines that were developed with support from NSET much earlier than the earthquake itself. This was a huge step in disaster preparedness in Nepal. With the help of Central Bureau of Statistics, about 1 million households were surveyed using the census model. Fully damaged houses were listed as reconstruction beneficiaries, while partially damaged houses were listed as retrofitting beneficiaries. Seismic damage assessment was a huge step in establishing technical norms and processes in recovery. The private houses reconstruction was approached as an owner-driven reconstruction. Government provided the technical and financial assistance where the house owners themselves were responsible for the disaster-resilient reconstruction or retrofitting of their houses. To regulate this process, the NRA developed the Grant Disbursement Guideline. Beneficiaries signed an agreement with the government. The financial grant support worth 300,000 rupees was provided in 3 tranches only after meeting the required technical norms as certified by an inspection engineer. The listed beneficiaries' bank account were drawn in the bank, and the cash grant was disbursed through the banking process because
for the transparent system to be established, if you distribute the money in the villages by the other general means, then the record keeping would also be very difficult. Financial management system would be difficult, and there would be the situation of the corruption even in the society. Yeah? That's why we thought that it would be better to have the banking channels to be utilized for providing the grant money to the people.
there were some dissatisfactions over the beneficiary identification process and grant installments. To address the arising dissatisfaction, procedures for handling of grievances was published. The DUDBC developed and published the Model Drawing Catalog volume following the National Building Codes much earlier than the NRA's operation. With training manuals, model drawings, and technical guidelines, 2,500 engineers were trained and deployed in earthquake-affected areas. In November 2016, the NRA developed the inspection guidelines. The minimum requirements for the reconstruction of the houses was to be compliant to the national codes.
प्राविधिक सल्लाह लिएर भयो भने घर त नियम अनुसार बनाउनु भएछ। अब दोस्रो किस्ताको लागि अहिले अनुसारको नियम अनुसारको छ। अब दोस्रो किस्ताको लागि हजुरको घर चाहिँ सिफारिस भयो है।
In remote areas, the deployment of technical personnel were delayed. As a result, houses which were reconstructed did not fully comply with the prescribed minimum requirements or the building code.
इन्जिनियर साहब आउनुभयो सबै ठोक ठिकै छ तपाईको बुवा घर अलिकति साइज ठुलो भयो कोठा साइज भनेर उहाँले त्यही भन्नुभयो सर
प्रब्लम त आउँछ नि अब डेफिनेटली फिल्डमा गएपछि के त हुन्छ त भन्दाखेरि तपाईको अब घरहरु प्राय अहिले अब ठेक्कामा दिने घरधनीले चाहिँ काम छिटो चाहियो भन्ने हुन्छ अब त ठेकेदारले त फाइदा खानु पर्यो त्यहाँबाट बिचमा त राम्रो सबै कुरा चाहिँ नि क्वालिटीको नहुन पनि सक्छ त्यसलाई चाहिँ नि अब कसरी सुधार गरेर लाने भन्ने कुराहरु पनि अब आएपछि सजिलो
On May 2017, a correction and exception manual draft was published.
NCET had past experience of working in similar situation when there was owner-driven housing reconstruction, especially in Pakistan after Kashmir earthquake in 2005. Because it's not possible that all the 100% buildings are constructed correct at first. We designed the solutions, how to make it better even after construction. So this is how the correction and exceptions manual was created.
The reconstruction was not possible without the domestic and foreign organizations' help. NGO mobilization guideline was drafted to mobilize different NGOs to assist the victims for relief and reconstruction work. NCET helped develop and issue various curriculum for training masons, which was the revised form of existing 5 days mason training course. It took 2 years for organizational setup and policy drafting. The victims were living on temporary shelters on harsh weather conditions. Reconstruction in several earthquake-affected communities started to take place only after 2 years. The policies and guidelines kick-started the reconstruction of private houses. Half a million houses were partially damaged in the earthquake. To address this issue and to promote enhancing the seismic capacity of existing buildings, repair and retrofitting manual was developed. The policies developed and implemented in different phases of reconstruction have been instrumental in driving the reconstruction of Nepal and achieving the current high levels of progress. However, there are still certain facades that need to be scrutinized as learnings for future disaster preparedness and recovery activities. The prioritization was given to reconstruction beneficiaries as 90% of damaged houses were listed as fully damaged house and only 10% of houses were listed for retrofitting.
We fully focused on reconstruction at the initial stage of our reconstruction interventions and not for retrofitting.
Instead of destroying damaged houses and reconstructing new earthquake-resilient houses, people left their damaged houses as it is and built their new houses beside the damaged ones.
They are living in a ring of fire.
We have to consider how we can make the existing buildings which are not completely collapsed but still vulnerable to make it safer. So a policy for wider or large scale retrofitting is very important.
Lessons suggest that urban reconstruction require a more specific technical and financial assistance model, different than rural reconstruction.
But urban reconstruction is one of the areas which needs slightly different type of arrangement by introducing different type of policies, policy instruments.
While reconstruction has been satisfactory,
We focused more on the earthquake safety and earthquake disasters, but there are more frequent disasters like landslide, floods, and others. So we have to expand from earthquake to other disasters as well.
we know for certain that there will be more natural disasters in Nepal. We have enough policies and guiding principles. However, the concern is about its implementation.
For that, as I mentioned earlier, you need legal backing. If you don't have legal backing, then this is not possible. Legal backing means you need act, you need rules, you need regulations, you need that.